This podcast is brought to you by the New South Wales Positive Rugby Coaching and Player Platform.
I'm Michael Hooper here from New South Wales Waratahs. I'm going to go through a few little drills that I'm doing here at the moment.
What we like to do at the Waratahs.
That last access step to perform dominant tackles.
I'll run you through both those kicks and show you how to execute.
My name is Sarah. Pushing through.
Take the space, move forward.
Then working back to front depth.
We do one full step.
The coach calls the defender while the attacker's trying to get over the ball. Welcome back to the New South Wales Positive Rugby Foundation Coaching and Development Podcast. I'm Andrew Hill and I've got Owen Roberts, our Coach Ed Manager, here just to moderate and make sure that we actually talk about coaching today. And we're really privileged to have a Scotsman who's been residing here for 20 odd years and a person that makes a massive difference in our game, both at a club level, but also in female rugby and at the super high end of performance for women's rugby at the moment. And that's Campbell Aitken. So thank you very much for your time, Campbell, and I really appreciate you coming on. So as we always try and start with, I just wanted to ask you just straight off, mate, what is it that sucked you into the game and just made that something that you love and you wanted to invest time in at all levels? And is there a defining moment or the first start that really locked you in and said, I'm a rugby bloke?
I was actually a soccer bloke growing up, obviously from Scotland. So, I just obviously went to a private school in Scotland, which only played rugby. So I was sort of stuck playing rugby rather than soccer. So, I just loved it. It's mainly the touring aspect of it when I was sort of in my 18, 19, 20, where back in the day where you could go on fun tours and whatever happened on tour stayed on tour, and no one had any mobile phones or what have you. So I think it's that was just the camaraderie has been is the thing for me, and it's certainly the thing that I miss from a playing point of view. Is that camaraderie with your teammates and what have you. So it's slightly different when you're coaching, and there's a different experience to it and a different expectation. But certainly those younger days of hanging out with your mates and having a bit of fun certainly hooked me into rugby and taking off from there, I suppose.
You can tell you've been in Australia a little while, mate. You're not as belligerent as me, still calling it football and calling it soccer.
Yeah, it took a while.
And as someone who started a little bit later, how old were you when you actually started playing rugby? Was it purely went to the private school and had to play?
Yeah, pretty much. What was interesting, the Melrose Sevens in Scotland is held every year, and it's I think the World Cup's the Melrose Cup. I think that's where technically Sevens was invented. A neighbour of mine took me down there before I'd even looked at rugby. One afternoon he said, "Oh, you should come down and watch the rugby with his son." So I went down there and actually Randwick were the invitational side that year, and they won it. And I think they had Campbell was playing, Lloyd Walker, and they just carved up, and there was about 20,000 people there. And I was like, actually, I'd not known much about rugby back then, and that was a sort of my first introduction to it, and then obviously went to school and took it up, and being a footballer or a soccer player, I wasn't that keen on the contact aspect of it, just grew into it with a good bunch of mates after that. And
if I fast forward a little bit, so you've had your rugby experiences and you land at East, and I always wonder what turns people from someone who loved the game and played, that turns them into a volunteer or a coach, or what pulled you in that sort of direction? Because for those of you who don't know, like, you've been on a board forever. You've been the director of rugby at East. You've coached from the bottom to the top. You then sunk your soul into trying to coach at the higher level with these girls, which we'll talk a lot about. But mate, how does that become such a part of your life, or what drives you to say, no, I can make a difference here?
Yeah, I think rugby and sport in general has always been a massive part of my life, and it was actually my wife and I would just moved to Sydney and we were looking for a place to live, and we happened to drive along O'Sullivan Road on a Saturday afternoon, and I just said, "Oh, look, there's a rugby ground in there," not knowing anything, and I said, "Do you mind if we pop in?" And of course, she rolled her eyes, and so I went in and just said, "Look, I've just landed in Sydney, and when do you train?" And they usually, I think everyone in the world trains Tuesday and Thursday nights. So, so I rocked up on the Tuesday night and got stripped for 4th grade that weekend. And actually, I was playing my second game for East in 3rd grade, I think it was, and my wife at the time was at an auction trying to buy our house, and I was playing rugby. And
priorities.
She phoned me up and said, "We got the house," and I was like, "Oh, let's go to try." So so the priorities there. So look, just I was with East for probably playing for about 5 or 6 years, and then took a bit of time off. I got injured, and then went back to playing just in the lower grades, and I think it's quite a common story where 4th grade are always looking for a coach. And I was like, I'll happily put my hand up and be a player coach. And what sort of soon transpired was, the younger kids were a lot quicker and faster than me, but it was more that love of teaching. And I've always sort of had this sort of inclination with regards to teaching, and I would always happily sacrifice myself and the team for someone else who's younger and coming up, and potentially who might not have been as strong a rugby player, but I think that it's more important that they play and the younger kids are playing instead of old farts like me keeping people out. So it just transitioned from 4th grade. I think I did that for a couple of years. I player coach for 2 years, and then moved up to 3rd grade, and sort of had a little bit of success there, and sort of snowballed from there. But that's certainly been a great journey, and I've sort of loved. Never regret putting my hand up to coach. I think, as I said, that teaching gene is in, and that volunteer gene's in me, and I just love it.
So where do you think that? I can tell you where my teaching or education gene comes from, and that's from definitely from both sides. In terms of my parents, mother taught in the same school for like 42 years, I think it was. But I'm just interested early on, like it's a fairly tough gig sometimes to put your hand up to play and coach 4th grade. What do you think sort of influenced you in terms of how you coached early on?
I think my certainly one of my main philosophies is all around enjoyment, and I certainly, the way I played rugby, for example, I like to throw the ball around and run around. I think, and certainly growing up in Scotland, that wasn't always didn't always meet eye to eye with the coaches that I was under, and there's certainly a few old school coaches. Probably where I've learned most is through not what they were doing, but doing the opposite. And I think I remember once playing in Glasgow, and the coach comes on at half time and the team said, "Oh, run faster, try harder." And we're like, "Really? Is that it? We're playing at the elite level here, and that's the best you can do." And we sort of sidelined him for that team talk, so it's that love of teaching. I initially wanted to be a PE teacher when I left school, but just didn't have the qualifications to get in, so I had to go down a separate path. But that's certainly that love of teaching has never really lost me.
And you talked about that experience of having some, I suppose, less than ideal words from coaches in your time. Do you see that coaching's evolved in a massive way, or is that more about the level that you've been coaching at? As in, did you have any great coaches when you were young, or do you think that's a completely different viewpoint from that era? That's how it was done, and now we're in a new era? Or do you think you just were lucky enough to have the bloke who told you to run faster?
I think that I've had some amazing coaches in my time, but I'm not sure their methods would necessarily go down very well now. But certainly the lessons I learned from that sort of tough love, as it was, I suppose, back then, and I just think that society's evolved a bit, and that sort of tolerance of that sort of behaviour or style of coaching is probably has gone down quite significantly. And I sort of always look at the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson, for example, in soccer. He's quite a dictator, I think, and having read quite a bit about him, I think, would he be as successful now if he came in as a sort of young manager now? I'm not sure. Yeah, certainly I think that's evolved, and I think society's evolved, and I think the older I get, the more I interact with people at work, for example, and we get understanding of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and how you treat people. I think sports no different, and I think that your relationship with your players is paramount.
And right from day one at East, do you think you had that sort of in your mind, that fun and enjoyment, but also that relationship side with the players that you sort of knew was important? Was that sort of something that you valued from day blot, or did that take a while to develop as you sort of went from player coach to coaching outright in third grade and then right up to coaching sort of first grade there at the club? Or is that something that built for you, or you said, no, this is what I believe and this is where you've headed?
A bit of both. I think it's, again, sort of getting some mentoring from people, understanding how I want to play the game, and you've also got to be cognizant of the club that you play for and that you represent, and if they've got a certain way of playing, then you've got to be mindful of that and continue that tradition. And I think someone like Randwick, for example, have got the Galloping Greens, and they've always had that sort of running rugby ethos. And I think you have to be conscious of that and have that as part of your armoury when you are coaching at certain places now. East have changed their playing style a million different times since I've been there. But yeah, I think. For me, my sort of coaching style evolved when I started playing rugby here with regards to the style of rugby. So it more suited me running the ball around and playing more open rugby. And I think that's just an Australian thing, really. I think if I was coaching in Scotland, I probably wouldn't get the roles I get because the style of rugby wouldn't be successful because the conditions are different and the expectations are different. So I think you just got to be mindful of those boundaries. And I think there's a phrase we use at work a lot is freedom within boundaries. So you do have freedom to express yourself, but there are sort of certain boundaries you can't go past.
Couldn't agree more, mate. I think even when I first came over here, I couldn't get my head around the sheer volume of attempted offloads. I was like, what is going on here? Keep the ball, build pressure, keep the ball, build pressure. But when you talk about, I like that, within boundaries, I can certainly feel like my boundaries and have gone from there to there since being in Australia because of the way they play. Do you think that's something that's happened with you as well?
Yeah, it's funny. Just following on what you said, one of my big lessons was more a lot of the mentality, right? So you're never out of it. Back in Scotland, if we're 3 tries down after 10 minutes, we're behind the post thinking, right, let's keep this below 50, so we can go out. Yeah, here I remember standing under the post and 21-0 down after 10 minutes, and I'm thinking we're done here, and the balance of the team are like, no, we'll score 1 try, we're back in this, and then we'll get another. And I'm thinking, you're mad, you're off your head. But yeah, I think that slowly is such a positive attitude that Australians have around that sort of stuff, whereas the dour Scot tends to take the more negative.
And so coming from obviously that background, and obviously it sounds like you've embraced a fair bit of that and suits where you wanted to go. Can you talk to me about your opportunity where you've worked your way up? And I suppose this is very relevant for a lot of people that want to coach at a high level. So they've had their go in the middle grades. They're at a great club like East or their own club. You make the step up to first grade, and you've learned to coach to a level where you've got that opportunity. you want to talk to me about that step up to sort of shoot shield level, and how much effort was involved there, and was it easier? Was it harder? What were the biggest challenges when you actually made that leap from a supporting act to the first grade team to suddenly being, right, you're the top dog, now you get to put your spin on it?
Yeah, look, there was certainly a lot of imposter syndrome. I was like, yeah, this is. I mean, a lot of nerves and a lot of genuine. I think they're going to find out I don't know what I'm talking about here. I think the research I did and started to do then, and that analysis I started to do then was more out of fear of being found out than anything else. And I think that was probably the biggest thing for me is that leap, is building the trust and gaining the trust of the players, and sort of almost having to justify yourself. I didn't go in there with a lot of confidence to. I've been coaching sort of third grade, and then probably done half a season at second grade, and then all of a sudden you're sort of in with first grade. And I think what's the higher up you go, you're not doing as much technical coaching because the players are already good players. And actually the incremental benefit that you can give them is actually not as great as it is when you're coaching the lower grades. And so it's funny, the coaching becomes almost less fun. There's more pressure attached to it, and that's what you sign up for. The higher up you go, the more pressure and the more expectation there comes, and again, it's sort of that takes time to get used to. A lot of players at that level are they're already good players, they're already set in their ways, and actually to get them to change and to get them to buy into actually what you're trying to achieve or what you're trying to do is probably the biggest challenge. Whereas players who are newer to the game or who are at lower grades, they tend to be a lot more accepting of change and a lot more accepting of different things to try because the fall is actually less, and so the risk is less. So I suppose that was probably the biggest challenge in my own mentality is sort of trusting myself and being more confident in myself. I'm thinking if I went back into that circumstance now, it'd be totally different. I'm a lot more confident, a lot more sure of the way I coach, and a lot more confident in general. So it was definitely that imposter syndrome to start with was massive.
I remember you talked about your ability just then to improve a team a small amount where they're already good players. And I remember a fantastic thing I went to with you and Mackenzie, who basically said, we're all at the same level coaching, and if I'm the best coach in the Super Rugby, I might improve my team by 2% more than the bloke who's the worst coach. So what I can focus on is the players, and if I can prove them as people and their buy-in and their commitment to the group by 1%, I got 15%, so I don't know why I'm coaching. So it was a really interesting way to look at it, and just interesting hearing you talk about a little bit the relationship side of it. Was that something you expected when you stepped up, that was going to be the most important part, or is that something you focused on, or was it the technical side you needed to get rid of that imposter syndrome? What was the balance between those two priorities, I suppose?
I think it was more the technical side that I tended to focus on. The other challenge is coaching players you've played with. Or you've been around for a while, and I think that is. I always like to think you should take a gap before you go back and go and try and sort of coach somewhere else or learn something else before you go back and coach where you've been playing for a while. And I think certainly I was quite naive with regards to the relationship side of it. I thought that was a given. Because I knew the guys and all that sort of stuff, but it's a different relationship, coach and player, than it is to player and player, or lower grade coach to first grade player. I think that there is that, whether that's snobbery or what have you, that people look down on the lower grades if you're up high, but you almost have to prove yourself a little bit more. And so I threw myself more into the technical side to try and prove myself. sort of hope that would then lead to further the relationship side further down the track.
And how'd that go? How'd that work out? Did you find that the technical stuff was exactly what you needed, or did you find something else out?
I mean, it's funny, wins and losses count for a lot as well, right? So if you're winning, it can sort of mask quite a lot of issues or frailties. We were sort of mid-table at best, and so I think that ultimately is what players want to do. They want to get better and they want to win. And if you're providing the best platform for them, then I think you get acceptance pretty quickly.
Mm. And at the same time, you're on the board there. I think were you director of rugby at the time, so sort of managing the whole thing?
No, I think I was actually, but rugby wasn't my portfolio at that point in time. I was just on the board. Right,
and you got a pretty high pressure job, and then you're also developing the women's team or trying to get the women's going at the club, all in a similar sort of era within a couple of years. So how did you, I suppose, manage all of those priorities? And obviously this leads to where you end up coaching the women's side as well. But I'm just fascinated how a guy like yourself who's got so much going on is able to throw so much energy into a club to try and make that change and make it better. And very interested in how you prioritise what you needed to do during that time.
Yeah, I think certainly, I think they all complement each other. To be honest, I think there is a lot on, but I think my work, for example, makes me better at a rugby coach. My rugby coaching makes me better at work, and so I think without that release, I mean, rugby's my release, and so it's my sort of happy place. So I can have an ordinary day at work and be dashing to rugby, thinking, "Oh my God, I've taken on too much," and I get on the training field, and by the time training's finished, I've forgotten all about what I was stressed about, and work, and tomorrow's another day. And I think it's important to have that release in your life, whether it's rugby or whether it's walking or running or whatever it is. I think that ability to be able to switch off is really important for anyone, and be able to not stress about one thing in your life, and actually stress about a lot of things. I do think it sort of they all complement each other, and I think certainly my rugby coaching makes me more empathetic at work and a better boss with my team at work, and my work, certainly the way we negotiate with people and that intensity at work helps me from a rugby point of view as well, and it just helps me think differently, and I think that was a large part of the certainly the cultural change we were trying to implement at East. I look back at my notes actually in 2016, and it was I think certainly when I first went on the board as the rugby director was, this isn't a great place. There's a lot of drinking culture. The culture is not great with regards to respect, and those were the notes I'd written down. Actually, I saw it yesterday. I was like, wow, and that was the main driver for us, and certainly the introducing a women's side was a big part of that. And I think that respect side of it, where, for example, I started the women's team in 2017, just as a sevens group, and I said to the board, it's 2017, we need a women's team, and they just said, well, good luck with that. And so just off we go. And so I then said, right, I'll do that. And it was small stuff that we were allowed to change, where, for example, we were one of the first training sessions the girls are having, one of the boys walked past and wolf whistled. And so given my role at the club, I was able to go over there and say, right, who did that? And this guy, oh, it was me. And I said, right, you're not playing for the next 3 weeks. And no one could really argue. Whereas if that was a women's coach, for example, at another club, that I'm not sure that they'd have that same ability or same freedom to do that. And that's the sort of small stuff where actually, if you start implementing that stuff straight away, I think that respect comes pretty quickly. And we were able to make quite a few changes from a culture point of view to quite quickly. And I think the results are showing both from the success of the overall club and actually the growth of the women's game with Anise. So yeah, it's been good.
And I'm just cutting our wine off here. I haven't let him out of 2 seconds, but culture is something I'm super interested in. And just from my very outsider point of view, just seeing the SuperW squad that you have that in spades a very, very clear sort of direction and culture and the way they go about their business. Is that, if I look back to East there and that your experience there and identifying some of those cultural problems and then setting out to set that right, was that something that you knew how to do? Did you have a strategy with that? Or is that something that you learnt and that you, together with East, worked on that actually gave you that ability to look at a club or a team culturally? And then how did that come and what did you do to try and change that? Because that's a powerful bit of work that's hard to do.
Yeah, there's more introducing consequences to behaviours, and that was probably the biggest thing. So that example of stopping a player playing for 3 weeks, and I think that was pretty clear. And the worst thing you can do to a player is stop them playing, and that's the quickest way they'll learn. And in certain circumstances is by stopping them playing, and I think you've got to be united as a group that's the way it is, and you don't accept anything less. And I think that old saying of the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. I think that's always been quite prevalent with me, and it certainly it resonated with me when I first heard it, and that's certainly something we get from a corporate point of view at work, and it's actually bringing that corporate attitude to a sporting club, where the behaviours are important, and that respect is really important. And I think, and it's not just for women; it's for the homosexual society. There's the LGBTQ groups, and I think it's race, all that sort of stuff. It's all those boxes that respect, certainly from a work perspective, and I think sporting organisations have slowly caught up. And I mean, you still see a lot of instances of it, which is disappointing, but I think certainly that attitude in society has grown up significantly in the last 10 years. And yeah, I think that's been useful for me to have to bring across to rugby.
I'm really interested in this, in that, you spoke about, you introducing cultures and working on cultures and the consequences involved. And like I've been to the rugby club on a Saturday and seen how vibrant a place it is. But I'm interested in, how did you develop the want or the need to want to implement these sort of changes and work on culture? Why is culture really important to you? What sort of learnings have you had as a young coach or a young man, or what kind of people have you had that have influenced you to understand the importance of it?
It's probably the biggest influence has probably been my wife. So she works in CVD. She's part of the Chief Executive Women's Group, and so we've got a daughter. We've got a son and a daughter, and it's actually that understanding the hurdles that our wife's face, for example, in her environment, and looking at my own behaviour, because look, I've not been a saint and still have a few issues, certainly according to my wife. Yeah, look, I think being that role model for certainly my daughter growing up, and probably more importantly my son, and that respect level, and understanding those challenges that people face, that as a white male I don't face, and certainly a white male that went to a private school, for example, I've got no idea what struggles other people face. And I've got no doubt that I was sort of born into a privileged area. But that's luck, and understanding different challenges. And I can't begin to fully understand what challenges other people are going through in society. But I think the more that we learn about that stuff, and the more we can sort of use our experience to help that and make sure that doesn't happen in our environment, then the better society will be.
So pretty clear the influence there that obviously your wife has, but also your perspective on that side of society, which is pretty significant. You end up coaching the New South Wales Waratahs Women's squad that have had all those challenges and adversity compared to the exact same level of player as a male. So when you enter that environment and you start working with these girls, can you tell me about those first sort of experiences as the SuperW comp's almost starting properly? They're getting finally a good opportunity, but it's still not the same, and it's still nowhere near what the environment that the boys would get. Can you tell me about your sort of starting to that and what you saw and what you wanted to change, and how that went from where it was? And obviously you don't have to talk all the way through to now yet, but just where it was, what did you need to do in those initial parts, and how challenging was that?
I mean, I was fortunate. I came in. I mean, they're a successful side, and they've got a lot of really good players and a lot of really good leaders in there. So yeah, I count myself quite fortunate in that regard. A lot of it was around changing the language the girls were using about themselves. They tended to use, "Oh, thank you, we're really grateful for everything," and actually, I didn't see them being treated as equals or anywhere close to that. And I think that language that they needed to change or still need to change is around, "Oh, we're just grateful to be here." Well, you're the best at what you do. I'm not sure that being grateful all the time is actually necessary. And I think making them understand how good they are. And I think we're only just beginning to get through to them how good they are, and you've got to earn stuff in life, and it's not just given to you. And I think that the big focus for us this year, for example, was on performance and not winning. And I think they've got what we're trying to drill into them this year is they've got an obligation to not only win, but actually play well and show people that you deserve to get treated the same as everyone else. And things don't just get handed to you. And so, but there was a lot of small stuff along the way, for example, where I think last year we got to choose from a budget point of view, where one night stay away, so we had to choose whether we were staying in Brisbane or we were staying in Melbourne, and what night we chose. And so I put it to the girls, and they chose to stay up in Queensland the night before the game against Queensland, which is understandable. But again, straight after the game, we're on the bus straight back to the airport. But the Melbourne example, I was like, well, I think that's a bit ridiculous. So I then investigated, or asked Erin to investigate how much it cost to stay the night in Melbourne one night. And so we managed to work out it was about $3,500, for example. So I made a couple of phone calls to a few mates and said, right, I need $3,500 to get the girls to stay in Melbourne for the night. And yeah, and luckily people were generous enough to put their hand in their pocket and paid for that extra night for the girls. But again, that's a lot of that stuff happens behind the scenes, but again, it's just you can see them physically growing in their confidence by actually treating them a little bit with a little bit more respect and understanding how good they are, and for them to understand how good they are.
You're right. It's not a gimmick, is it? Women's rugby isn't a gimmick. It's like what you sort of gone on to something I was going to ask you about a little bit later on, but I'll ask you about it now. Because whilst it's, I think it's fair to say the Waratahs, it's been a pretty dominant program and gone pretty well throughout Super Rugby, SuperW even, and then you've been part of that for the 2 or 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, 3 years. Yeah,
3 years now. So when I've watched in the past, I think personally it's pretty clear that the New South Wales team is, in my opinion, by far the better team in that competition. What's happened, I felt, is particularly in the finals against Queensland, we may have gone into our shells a little bit. We played within the 15s, whereas this year it was they've come to play rugby and they played a really good brand of rugby and scored some ridiculously good tries. So I wanted to know, from a coaching point of view, or from whatever point of view, really, what's been the difference this year? Why has he gone from that? Just going into themselves a little bit and just getting across the line to, wowing everyone pretty much on the field.
Yeah, it's just that mental side of the game. It's just that belief. And every year we've always said, we're way better than Queensland, for example. But we've never been able to prove it. And I think that performance aspect of it. And I think last year I said after the Queensland game, there's unfinished business because we beat them by 3 points. But I think that game could have gone either way, to be honest. And I think we always felt that we were better. And so at the start of this year, we sort of put the onus on the players, and I think I touched on it. It was all about performance, and it's up to them to prove that they're better than everyone else. And I think everyone bought into the style of rugby, and there was a real focus on using those wide channels because that's where our threats are. And yeah, certainly everyone seemed to buy into it and seemed to enjoy the aspect of actually just playing rugby, playing with the ball a bit more, and yeah, that sort of. I think I didn't know which way it was going to go when we played Queensland up there in the first game. Could have gone anyway, and before the game, you just said, "Geez, I hope they expressed themselves." And yeah, certainly they went out, and I think scoring a couple of early tries helps that. If it had been tight, if it had been tight up to half an hour, and I'm not sure the game would have ended up the way it ended up, but. Again, it's sort of getting those early tries and getting those couple of things that work early make a huge difference. And yeah, so we were lucky enough that happened, and the girls just took it from there. And the final, I don't think when Queensland scored after 5 minutes in the final, and we were just on the radio, and the girls were completely calm, and we just said, "Look, we haven't touched the ball yet. Don't worry about it. Wait till we get the ball." And and all of a sudden, sort of that level of confidence was massive. And I think previous years we potentially would have gone, "Oh my God, we just need to get back into this and scrape home." But this year we're like, "No, let's really take it to them." And it was a couple of things. So before halftime, I don't know if you probably wouldn't have noticed, but before halftime in both the games against Queensland, we got given a penalty on halfway, and both games the referee said, "Oh, do you want to just tap it and take half time?" And both times you could hear the girls on the referee's mic saying, "Nah, we want to play." And the first game we took a scrum, the second game we took a line out, and we scored from both. And I think that's that level of confidence that the girls clearly had then was really pleasing. Yeah, look, certainly talking about New South Wales and being part of the competition, we've certainly looked for avenues to challenge our girls as well. And so this year we organised a game against Canterbury over in Christchurch, which would have been a great challenge for our girls. And I deliberately sought out that fixture because not that I want to lose, but I want to understand how our girls react and how our girls play under different circumstances, under different pressure. And I think last year, for example, we played the Fijian national team who just qualified for the World Cup, and they just belted Queensland the weekend before, and they came to Daceyville on the Friday night, and I think we took sort of 30 or 40 points off them. And again, that challenge, you can see the girls rise to those challenges, and we just need more of them. And exposure to that high level of rugby is really important for the next step.
Can I ask about? Can I just jump on this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
This year was so disrupted from these girls. So the build up over the last couple of years to get this team to the level of training and the confidence that you spoke about and being able to do some of the things on the field that you knew they could do. How challenging is it, and how do you manage these girls that are at such a high level, ready to go when their season's been taken away and they're not getting those opportunities to play, or it's shortened, or you end up in a very short SuperW there? And how do you keep those people motivated, and how do you manage that group? Because that is so challenging, and there must have been an incredible amount of work that went into keeping these girls up this year.
Yeah, it has been difficult. They've had a number of false starts through sort of mainly obviously through COVID. None of the test matches, for example, have gone ahead. Hopefully they get the test matches coming up. But yeah, it has been difficult, and certainly when the World Cup was postponed, that was probably our biggest challenge, where a couple of girls took probably 2 or 3 weeks off, and we were happy to say, look, yeah, go away. Like the last thing we want you here is not being happy being here, and you just go away, process it however you want. We're here for you, and just come back when you're ready. And we'd sort of check in with them every now and again, and yeah, they came back and just went to another level. And I think that there seems to be something around playing for New South Wales that the girls love, and they love the environment and love being there. And it's that quite a tight knit group of girls, and yeah, they certainly push each other. It's I find that my job's probably quite easy, and I catch up with the leadership group once a week, and just to get the vibe and see what's happening. And sometimes we'll change training up pretty quickly, and other times we'll adjust something else. So yeah, and certainly when we were away up in Coffs, where we had during the competition, where we had our first game cancelled in the morning of when we were supposed to be playing, and I think that was hard watching other teams go to the game and then come back. But it's funny, they came back and I'd gone to Big W and Rebel Sport and bought volleyballs and cricket sets and everything, and soccer balls, and all the other teams came back and played the games, and we were all, I think there was about 40 people playing beach volleyball, and just having a laugh. And I just think they genuinely enjoy each other's company. And then as that week sort of went on, we struggled against the Brumbies for a bit, and then the following night we had a talent night, for example, and the coaches all dressed up, and we were the judges, and then we had a trivia night just straight after that, and just sort of kept that lighthearted. And I just think that if you provide an enjoyable environment, then people love being there, and you'll get the best out of them.
So I saw, first of all, actually, before I ask, what did you dress up as?
We had white shirts, bow ties, and tutus.
Lovely. Good. I like that. I think just going back to what Hilly asked around, that motivation level, and you talking about that environment, that positive environment. I read the stat from that tournament. There were, from the teams that played there, including obviously there was a sort of a brief sort of barbarian team, but also the President's team as well. There were 65 players from New South Wales in that tournament. I mean, what does that tell you for the future, and what challenges does that give you for the future of the women's game in New South Wales as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is actually keeping everyone happy. And actually, we do have a lot of talent in New South Wales, and my overwhelming feeling coming away from SuperW this year was disappointment in the other states. I think we would certainly expect them to be better than they were, and obviously they've got different circumstances, and we're very, very blessed with the group of players that we do have. But yeah, I think we do like to be challenged, and it's unfortunate that probably at the moment our second team's probably the closest that we're going to get, and that is very challenging, and keeping people happy, and certainly phoning talented girls or meeting with talented girls who who would walk into any other SuperW squad and tell them that they're not playing SuperW this year. And it's a challenge for Rugby Australia is actually to make sure that there's a competition that actually makes sure the best players in the country are playing in it. And at the moment, that's not the case. And I think it's really important that we provide that aspect for them. And what the answer is, I don't know, but certainly at New South Wales, we're constantly just looking forward. So at the moment, our big thing is, right, we want to start an academy for the girls, similar to Gem Blue for the boys. And I think I've written down on paper our under-20s team, and geez, it's strong. Like, it's really strong. And it would comfortably beat probably three out of the other 4 states, and probably the 4th one would go close. And I think that's again, it's then you've got this pipeline of 20 or 30 players coming through. When you've already got a young squad as your senior squad, I think the Waratahs squad is quite young at the moment, then where do these young girls go? And how do we provide that opportunity for them to keep evolving and keep playing? And that's a massive challenge for the women's game. And the demands almost sort of superseding the involvement of the competition at the moment. So yeah, how do we make that better? And I'd love to see an under-20s competition, for example. Similar sort of vein, even if it's just a nationals format where they're away for a week, and we're looking into tours for our academy, for example. Love to take them to New Zealand for a week and play against some of the other players, some of the other development squads over there. And again, it's just providing that opportunity and that pathway for the girls is proving quite challenging when there is a sort of logjam at the top.
And from a growth, if I go the level slightly below, and I don't know how important this is from a high performance immediate sort of point of view, but the Shute Shield clubs are largely in agreement that they're all going to start or have women's teams over the next couple of years is the aim, I think, for everyone. And I think we've had for the last 20 odd years about 8 women's 15-a-side teams in Sydney. That's been pretty stagnant in the same amount. Great players, but only 8 clubs. Do you see that being a necessary tool to raise the standard of those competitions, so there's more teams, maybe Div 1 and Div 2? Is that part of the answer, or is that more long term? That logjam of players is difficult to manage. I'm wondering whether Shute Shield's in the right direction.
Yeah, I think hopefully. I mean, I think that the certainly the Jack Scott Cup at the moment is again, it's the only platform we've got, right? So I think that's a challenge where ultimately you know who's going to win it every year, and that will be the same for the next 5 years. And I think that's a massive challenge. And what the biggest issue is that each club tends to rely on one person who drives that women's program, and if they leave, the whole thing falls apart. And I think that's where we've got to get to, where the clubs have a plan similar like they do for the Colts and the grade, that it's not just relying on one person. And so, for example, East, it tends to follow me, and actually, ideally, I want to step away from that and allow someone else to come in. But again, it's sort of it's almost your baby, and you're worried that if you step away, then it might fall apart, and it's sort of that trust level. But again, a number of clubs have sort of come and gone, and I think it's hard because you've got players who are starting out in rugby and who've never played rugby before, and the first game of the season, their first game ever, might be against Sydney Uni, and you're playing against 12 Wallaroos. Mm-hmm. That's hard for someone to enjoy that and say, "Oh, do you enjoy yourself?" And geez, I didn't touch the ball and I got trampled on every time I touched it. So, or every time someone else got it. So, I think that there is a huge challenge, and it's up to the clubs to embrace that and own it. And I think it's you've just got to stick with it. And I think you've got to accept that you're not going to win. Probably for the first 5 or 6 years, and certainly at East, we've certainly seen that we've got better and better every year, and but again, that's if you build a good program, people tend to come, and I think that's where the Shoot Shield clubs certainly have to show a little bit of patience around this stuff, and I appreciate it's no one's saying it's easy, but it's certainly you've got to be patient and embrace it. Otherwise, it will become a big issue where there's no pipeline and for anyone to go.
And the thing you'd like to say to people, obviously, the key person syndrome you spoke about, that one person giving their time and love to those group. How do we get more people, but what would you say to get involved in women's rugby at a club and try and provide them a manager, a coach, whatever? What are a couple of things that you need to know when you're dealing with a group of girls and trying to put them in the best environment? What are some of the learnings that you've had that you could share that might get someone over the edge? You go, no, I should have a go at that. As long as I'm across that, I'm going to go all right in coaching or managing a group of girls, because I think we need more people there by the sounds of it.
Yeah, well, certainly for me, it's sort of, I think the overwhelming feeling for me is that coaching women's rugby for the last 5 years has been the most fulfilling coaching experience I've had. And that's from obviously fourth grade, first grade down at East and various other roles. But it is the most fulfilling. And we spoke earlier about being able to teach people and from scratch, effectively, how to pass a ball, how to make a tackle, and there's a great feeling when you actually see someone make the tackle for the first time, and it's probably the same at juniors, but certainly with the girls, there's certainly a lot of fear and a lot of unknown there, and you can see them out their comfort zone, and you can see them grow, and you grow with them, and I think, as I said, the feeling you get from that is great, and I love it, and I love going back down to East and coaching there. The girls there are great, and we get newbies every week, and you see them really, really nervous going on for their first game, and then you give them a high five afterwards and say you enjoy it, and they love it. And that's back to proper, for me, that's proper sort of old school coaching, and just providing a positive environment where they feel safe and they can bring their whole self to the game, and I think the camaraderie they've got, and I mean, I love it, and I think the women's game is quite unique in the it's people practicing with people who are Wallaroos playing for the country, and we same at East, we've got players who it's first game of rugby and they're playing alongside a couple of Wallaroos. I mean, that's you don't get that in many other sports.
Wow. I've got to ask then, because it's you're right in terms of when I was teaching, like differentiation of lessons. It's it's tough in a way, but we'll speak to a lot of people, and positive environment will come up a lot, right? And that's a really good thing to hear. What I am really interested in is, with all these players of a completely different training age, what are the main differences that you've seen from coaching men and women?
The women. So the difference I find, certainly the women come with no preconceived views. They're pretty much a blank canvas, and they just want to learn, and they listen, and they implement what you're talking about. Whereas a lot of the boys come in, they've obviously played rugby a lot, and have various opinions. They've probably got their dad in the background or their mum in the background telling them how great they are, and et cetera, and they've always had they've always been the hero at school, for example, all that sort of stuff. And it's difficult to allow them to have that growth mindset or that learning mentality. Whereas I've found with the girls is they just want to learn, and that's SuperW girls as well as the girls who are brand new to the game. They all just want to get better. They all want to learn, and they listen, and they ask a lot of questions. But I
was going to say, so if they listen, I'm sure they ask a lot of questions, and that's got its own challenges, right?
Yeah, again, you've got to be sure of yourself, because again, sort of they'll find you out pretty quickly. And again, I think it's a lot of times you know, I'll be all right. You'll be all right. Don't worry about it. And but certainly the SuperW girls, they ask a lot of questions because they want to know detail. And a lot of it, and a lot of rugby's about feeling the game and game management and understanding the game. And a lot of what happens in the game is really difficult to then verbalize to someone and say, "Oh, you do this," because actually you might get a different picture every single time. And there's no right and wrong. But certainly a lot of the girls are after absolute detail. I need to run here. And so, well, you run there, but if that happens over there, you're going to do that. And so it's actually just that certainly the challenge of implementing that game management and just general understanding that you get from years and years of playing is probably the greatest challenge for coaching the girls. But as I said, look, their willingness to learn is second to none, and that's hugely infectious.
And you spoke a little bit before about your leadership group there, and obviously hopefully the leadership group is willing to learn as all what you've just spoken about. But can I ask, how does that relationship work within the SuperW sort of squad? That how much of their influence goes into the team versus you as the coach, and how does that work together? And I'd also be interested in a couple of those girls in that leadership group, because there are some incredible women there. I'd like to hear about how you work with that relationship and some of the outstanding sort of things that they bring to the table as well.
Yeah, so it's first and foremost, there's four of them in it. So it's Grace Hamilton, Ailey Batabazanga, Emily Robinson, and Katrina Barker. So they're probably the older heads in the group. And yeah, it's just a complete honest conversation. They'll just say, look, we did that last week, that didn't really work, or the girls didn't really like that, and I'll explain why we did it and whether or not we change it or whether we persist with it. That's obviously my call. But there was an example, like this year we got a wrestle coach in that I thought would be a bit different, and that was a 6-week program. So he came in every Thursday night, and after the 4th week, the girls were like, you know what, this isn't really working for us. So I changed it. So I phoned them up and said, Mike, we'll just can it for the last couple of weeks, and we'll try again next year, just when we've got a bit more time. And yeah, that was a good example of the girls taking feedback from the players, just saying, look, this isn't working, and this is something we probably need to change. And yeah, happy to change it. And if I think something's reasonable, then yeah, we'll do it. But yeah, I think that openness of communication I've got with certainly with the leadership group in particular, I just find I find out what's going on with the rest of the players, because there's no way I can get to 30 players in a week. So yeah, it's just understanding. Look, I'll see someone who's a bit down. I'll say, look, are they all right? And I'll find out, and the leadership group will come back and say, oh, look, they've got this going on, and then that then allows me to deal with that individual, rather than actually making that individual feel a bit awkward coming to me. It's more. I like to use the leadership group for that sort of stuff, where those sort of touch points where players are happy to speak to them, whereas it's probably a bit awkward speaking to a middle-aged man about something that's potentially a bit sensitive. So yeah, I think that works really well, and I hope the players enjoy it. Yeah, I don't speak to them necessarily about selection. I'll tell them what I'm thinking, but yeah, I certainly don't ask for their opinion that often on the selection matters, because I just think that's not really their domain. And it's more for the coaches and coaching staff to understand that, and we certainly use them to spread our thinking around that. But yeah, it's certainly a really important relationship that we've got with that leadership group. And I don't have a leadership group at East, for example. But yeah, it's certainly something we use quite well at the Waratahs.
And I suppose I'm going to go a little off topic, and I think we're probably you've been very generous with your time, so conscious of not taking the rest of the day away from you. But a question I love asking, particularly with people with kids, is if just with your kids in mind, going down to their sport, doesn't matter what sport it is, and with your sort of experience as a coach and actually understanding, the high level, but also your journey right through, what's one thing that you'd love to see happening at your kids' sport or kids' sport in general? When you, from a coaching perspective, you go down and watch something happen, what do you wish there was more of, or what would you love that every time you went down there, that thing happened?
Enjoyment. I just think I see so many coaches just winning, and that's all they really care about. And it's at that level. My daughter's 12, and I mean, I think I've got numerous examples of AFL coaches or hockey coaches or what have you, and you see players just standing on the sideline who are not getting a game, and like, really, does it really mean that much? And I think that's my biggest bugbear. And I think as a coach, you've got to be willing to lose. I think certainly that at kids level, it is ridiculous. And I mean, my wife thinks I'm antisocial because I stand behind the post, for example, or stand away from everyone else because I can't stand the parent chat on the sideline about how great their kids are and all that sort of stuff, or opinions on coaches. But I just think that, so there's probably two things, that willingness to lose and understand that kids learn from losing as well. And the other thing is the amount of coaches that I've seen turn up who really don't care. And they're just young kids who are obviously being paid by the school or what have you to be there, but they're not remotely engaged. And I think that sort of stuff drives me nuts. And I think it's not much to ask to be engaged for an hour or teach the kids something, rather than just sort of stand on the sideline and accept that you're going to get paid whatever it is you get paid by the school. And again, it's sort of being, from my background, that sort of stuff really irks me. But I don't say anything. I just whinge in the car on the way home.
If you complain too hard, you'll be volunteering on your 14th committee and coaching your 12th team at the same time, mate. One of the things that I love is coaches and people that are so caring about the people and the things that they're doing, that they volunteer and stick their hand up and try and make it better. And you're absolutely one of those people that has done that, obviously over a long period of time. And that the community would appreciate that. But I certainly hope you continue to get rewarded with this girls' performance at super level, because you're making a difference there. And certainly that's the reward for years of toil, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's great, and I certainly look at that as I'm very privileged to be associated with certainly with the Waratahs and East as well, and I think just the dedication that these girls show is great, and yeah, I'm sure if I wasn't there, someone else would be there, and so I just look at it as I'm very, very fortunate to be with that group of girls and watching them grow, and I can't wait to watch them at the World Cup next year. And help them next year through their journey towards that. And yeah, if they can show what they can do at the World Cup, then I'll be their number one fan.
If I can sneak in one more question, because this is something that we've got to work on from a coach development point of view. And like Campbell, you would have had great coaches in your past, some other coaches who maybe weren't as great. And clearly you're having an effect on the players that you're coaching now, right? So you must have in your mind an idea of some of the really good assets and qualities that make a really good coach. So from your group of SuperW players, because we need to work, we've got some really good playing role models. I think we probably need more coaching role models as well. Who do you think would be our up and coming coaches from that squad?
Got to be careful here. There's quite a few who think they're great coaches. Look, I think people that live and breathe the game. So someone like, I think Emily Robinson, for example, lives and breathes the game. I think she'd be an interesting one to coach against. I think she'd be great. I think someone like Katrina Barker, who just looks at the game a bit differently, and it's certainly one of our most influential players, would be a great coach. And then I think Pauline Pile, who's a bit, she's got kids, and you can tell that attitude and just the way she is and her mannerisms. I think she'd be really good as well. And then of course Grace and probably Emily Chancellor. But yeah, I'm not sure I'd wish it upon them, but I think you're right. We certainly do need more female coaches and role models in the game. I think Inga, who I've just done my level 3 with, she's a really good example of that, a really good coach, and can't wait to see what the future holds for her. And yeah, if I can support her in any way, then happy to. And but yeah, I think there is that issue, and the players wanting to sort of give back to the game, and I think it's not easy transition to make. And I think someone like Ash Houston, for example, who retired and has just gone back to be sort of player coach at Gordon, and I do like the way Gordon have set about what they're trying to do. So they've got Ash in as a player coach, they've got Evie Horomia as a player coach in the forwards, and they've got Luke, who's overseeing them. And I think, again, that transition, I think if we can get more females into that assistant coach role, for example, soon, they can then become the head coaches and certainly take the reins. And you see it in a number of sports where the female coaches are, they're genuinely outstanding coaches. And yeah, it's just being given the opportunity is probably what they're looking for.
That's it. And at all levels of the game as well, there's some great community coaches, both male and female, and the more females we get, the better. And then you look at someone, so a level 2 I did at the start of the year, with Evie was on it, but Noella Green, that was brilliant. She'll be a great coach at whatever level she puts her mind to there. So certainly someone I might look forward to working with you on there then, mate.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I agree. I think she'd be great. We'll have to get her to East.
Oh, brilliant. Well, we might wrap up there, Campbell, but mate, I really appreciate your time. And as I've said 1,000 times, I think in the podcast, you are a man doing a lot of things, and to give up your time is really greatly appreciated by us. And hopefully we can shine a little bit more light on the girls who are doing an amazing job. But we learned heaps from that, and thank you. And hopefully we'll see many more years of you making a difference at both Easts and also with the girls at the SuperW team. So thanks very much, mate.
Yeah, thank you to you guys as well. I really appreciate what you're doing here, and it's really important that we start spreading the word, and not just on women's rugby, but women rugby in general. And I think it's really appreciate what you're doing. And Owain, thanks very much for what you do for me. I certainly enjoy bouncing ideas off you, and really appreciate your sort of role in my coaching life. So thanks, guys.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you very much, mate. Look after yourself and look after the family. All the best, mate.
I'm Michael Hooper here from New South Wales Waratahs. Going to go through a few little drills that I'm doing here at the moment.
What we like to do at the Waratahs.
That last access step to perform dominant tackles.
I'll run you through both those kicks and show you how to execute.
My name is Sarah. Pushing through.
Take the space, move forward.
Then working back to front depth.
We do one full step.
The coach calls the defender while the attacker's trying to get over the ball.